Okay, my clock has shown that it's just gone 10:38. So because I'm always compliant with my orders, I shall start now. So welcome everyone to this session. I'm David Evans. I'm a public health researcher from the University of the West of England. I'm also a UKPHR board member, but I'm here wearing my researcher hat today to talk to you about a piece of work that I'm currently doing, the attitudes of employers to public health practitioner registration. Just move this along, see if that will work. I'd like to acknowledge my steering group, colleagues in public health workforce development from Health Education England, and also thanks to the participants who gave up their time, often under intense work pressures due to COVID, and to acknowledge Health Education England, who funded this work in London and the Southeast. But just to say that the findings and analysis are mine and not necessarily those of Health Education England. Apologies to colleagues from Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. This work was done entirely in England, in London and the Southeast, but I think that you'll find that some of the findings really are relevant across the UK, but I'll be interested to have any discussion of that later on. The other thing to say is that I've just finished the interviews last week, so they're not fully analyzed yet. So these are very much interim findings, work in progress. But I don't think that the final conclusions will differ markedly, but just to say that this is still very preliminary at this point. Okay, this was a project funded by Health Education England in London and the Southeast, and the aim was to understand the attitudes, policy, and practice of employers of public health practitioners towards practitioner registration. And it was a qualitative study using semi-structured interviews, and we had a purposive sample of line managers and workforce leads. And we recruited in 3 ways: through notices and public health e-bulletins, through contacts, and particularly by following up practitioner job ads. We were actually talking to the line managers where posts had been advertised, which was really a very fruitful way to pursue people, we found. And I'm doing a thematic analysis, and I will explore some of those themes with you today. So the background to this is that a number of national organizations like UKPHR, Health Education England, Public Health Wales have encouraged and supported public health practitioner registration. But there has been a lot of uncertainty over the degree to which employers, all employers, encourage or support registration. You'll be aware, if you attended the first day of the conference last week, that UKPHR has been doing its bit to promote public health practitioner registration through the Public Health Heroes campaign and the New Employers Toolkit. But the limited research that there's been in this area, and particularly some work that I did with Christina Gray back in 2018-19, showed that actually, if you look at, this is the article that we published in 2019, and if you looked at job ads, and we looked at 56 job ads in 2018 for public health practitioners, and what we found was that only a small number, 3 in fact, actually specifically mentioned UKPHR registration as an essential criteria. There was a larger number, a slightly larger number of 13, which mentioned some form of professional registration, so with either UKPHR, Nursing and Midwifery Council, Healthcare Professions Council. But the key finding was that only a small minority of job ads for practitioners were actually requiring or even having as desirable public health practitioner registration. So that did raise questions for us about what were the attitudes of employers towards registration if it wasn't appearing very regularly in job ads. So that this qualitative study, interview study, was really to follow that up and to understand employer attitudes. So we've interviewed 31 people, and that's just to give you a sense of the profile of participants. The thing that I would emphasize is that this was actually quite difficult to do because the sort of people we are wanting to talk to, public health consultants and public health, senior public health managers, were all very busy with COVID. So although we would have liked a larger sample and a more diverse sample, Actually, we were really pleased to get the participation that we did. However, having said that, the thing that we recognize is that the people who agreed to participate were, generally speaking, enthusiasts, positive about registration. So I suspect that when people are very busy, you're going to get the enthusiasts responding positively, much more so than those who are neutral or skeptical about registration. So I suspect that this is actually quite a strongly skewed sample towards those who are more positive about registration. Having said that, I think that the findings are still very interesting. So in terms of broad categorization of attitudes, I think that one can kind of identify 4 broad attitudes. So there are a number of participants who were really very enthusiastic about practitioner registration. They saw it as essential for ensuring practitioner competency and as a key process for professional development. Really, really strong advocates. Very often these people were involved in the registration scheme themselves as assessors or verifiers, or they've been promoting it to their staff. So really positive people. There's a second group who were positive but saw it as more desirable than essential, that it was an opportunity for people to fill gaps in their professional development. So it was something that they supported, but they weren't as passionate as the first group. Then a third group who were positive about it, but saw it as one of several potential options for professional development for practitioners. So they saw it alongside the potential to do an MSc, the potential to do other professional development pathways, particularly in local authorities where there are a lot of opportunities for leadership development or commissioning and development courses and so on. So it was one of several options. And then finally, there was a smaller group who were more neutral about registration, who really saw it as a means of documenting existing practitioner competency, but not particularly as a development opportunity. So I just thought I'd share a few of the quotes with you. I'm not going to read through this all, but it's up there on the screen if you want to read it. This is a fairly typical example of a senior public health manager who saw registration very positively, but only as one of several development pathways. So one thing that was striking was virtually everyone I spoke to was very positive about offering practitioners opportunities for professional development. But here it was one of several different routes that were on offer within this authority. So some people were supported to go down the route of seeking specialist registration by portfolio. Some were offered opportunity to be supported with practitioner registration by portfolio. Some people were supported with undergraduate or postgraduate qualifications. So, none of these were seen as necessarily a better pathway than others. They were different pathways for different practitioners. So quite often the discussion on the relative importance placed on practitioner registration versus a master's in public health. Both registration and the MSc were valued, but they were often seen as equally valued but alternative pathways for professional development. And very often it was viewed as this was very much down to the personal choice and the personal circumstances of the practitioner. So bringing in their other educational qualifications, their career aspirations, their life and family situations. Clearly, some managers valued registration more than the MSc because they felt registration demonstrated competency in practice, while others valued the MSc more as developing deeper and wider knowledge and new skills. I've just got a couple of quotes to demonstrate those different views. So this is a public health principal, so somebody who was working in a senior role but not a consultant role, who valued registration over the MSc. And this was really because it showed people's longer term commitment that they were working at that level, that they were working in practice. So this individual very much valued registration more than the master's. And I did have several comments from people sort of saying, well, you can come out of a master's with a lot of academic learning, but you don't necessarily know how to apply that learning in practice. Alternatively, this was a consultant in public health who very much valued the MSc over registration. And again, this was somebody who saw registration more as sort of formalizing, collating existing competency rather than developing you, whereas the MSc gives you additional skills, broadens your horizon, deepens your knowledge. So I think that, again, this person wasn't negative about registration, but they just saw the MSc as a more developmental route. A key finding was that registration was often seen by employers as demonstrating competency, even when it wasn't a stated criteria in the job description. So one of the things that I noticed is that often evidence of continuing CPD was an essential criteria within job descriptions, even when registration was not a criteria. And discussing it within employers, they very much saw registration as evidence that somebody was well developed in terms of their CPD. And several people said things like, well, you know, if somebody's a registered practitioner, they're almost bound to be on the short list, even when it's not a stated criteria. Those who had pursued or were pursuing registration were often seen as those who were the more able, the more dynamic, the more committed. So even when it wasn't a stated criteria in job descriptions, employers actually often viewed it positively in the recruitment and promotion process. And this was really brought home to me by someone who had a workforce development lead role within a local authority. They were describing the fact that they themselves were a registered practitioner. And at one point in the conversation, they were saying that, you know, in terms of value, it probably hasn't impacted my career. And then they stopped and paused and reflected for a moment and thought, oh, except I guess that it has helped me to get this current workforce development role. So they had realized in the course of our conversation about this that, again, that their registration had not been a formal criteria in their appointment to their current role, but actually it had actually helped
see more positively because they had done it.
And there were a number of conversations about the benefits of registration being sort of hard to assess, but, you know, having a sense that people, as this consultant said, it's a bit chicken and egg, that people who are showing promise and dedication tend to have it suggested to them. Obviously, they're developing, but they might have developed anyway. They would have been developing anyway. But again, it shows that people who are registered or going through the registration process are often seen as the more dynamic, the more able. You know, wanting to do it is a sign that you're actually a committed, going places person. Some additional findings came out of this. Really strong views of the need for an additional level of registration for those people who are working above the practitioner level and below the consultant level. So people with various titles of public health principal, advanced practitioner, senior strategist. Some of those people were registered as practitioners. Some of them were working towards specialist registration by portfolio, but all of them felt that there was a gap in the kind of in the range of registration on offer. The other thing is that I think, with one exception, someone who was slightly skeptical, there was an almost universal welcome for the introduction of the public health practitioner apprenticeship. Many people really keen on that. And a widely shared desire for a more stepwise career pathway in public health, so that you could go from practitioner to senior practitioner to principal to consultant. But here is a quote from another consultant about the need for registration for senior practitioners or principals, and talking about the fact that some people, you know, who are experienced in public health, have perhaps been working in public health for 10 or 15 years, are reluctant to do what they see as a retrograde step, which is at a lower level than they are currently working at. The other thing I just wanted to point out is that, again, this is just an impressionistic comment, and we will be rerunning our survey of job descriptions. But I'd say that between January and March this year, I have seen an increasing number of job descriptions where practitioner registration is either essential, as in the top example here, or is desirable on an equivalent level with an MSc, as in the bottom example here. So we will repeat the exercise that we've done every year in 2018, 2019, 2020, and we will do it again in 2021 to see if we are seeing an increasing proportion of practitioner job ads requiring registration either as essential or desirable. So the last point I wanted to make is that where people had offered practitioner jobs, had advertised practitioner jobs, we were interested to explore when registration wasn't in job descriptions, why that was. And I think I've identified 4 key issues. So one was inertia. When people are really busy, sometimes it's just easier to reuse the existing job description, which doesn't have registration in it. Because if you want to change the job description, you might need to have it regraded. So it's just, there's an inertia element. Sometimes it's a conscious choice because people want to make sure that posts, particularly entry-level posts, are open to applicants with non-traditional backgrounds. And there's an equity issue that in some areas the registration schemes have only been recently, so it didn't seem fair to require it of people. And some employers wanted to have a wide range of people applying, specifically if they wanted somebody who had specific alcohol and drugs experience or sexual health experience. They didn't want to narrow the field by restricting it to people who are registered practitioners. So my conclusions are that practitioner registration is valued by many employers, even though it's still only appearing in a minority of job ads. And registration is not included in job descriptions due to a variety of factors, as I've just been talking about, inertia, equity issues, and so on. But employers often, in conversation, demonstrate that there are hidden aspects to the recruitment and promotion. Actually, they do value registration, and people who are registered, are seen very positively as I say, the more kind of dynamic, the more committed. And as evidence of continuing professional development. So I just wanted to finish. I discussed with my steering group whether I should end with recommendations, and they felt we were a bit early for that. So we thought that we should leave you with questions. So things to think about today and over the coming weeks. How do you overcome this inertia that leaves practitioner registration out of job descriptions? How do we encourage more use of phrases like willingness to work towards registration, which address some of the issues around equity and inclusion? And how do we encourage the inclusion of registration as a desirable if it's deemed that making it essential is not appropriate? And what more can you do personally, and what more do you think UKPHR should be doing? So thank you very much for listening, and please do put any questions or comments you have in the chat function, and I will try. Just a quick look to see what people have put in already, because I can't actually look while I'm presenting. So Heather Sloan from NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde is saying that they've put UKPHR registration as desirable in our job adverts for health improvement roles. So that's great to hear, and that's certainly something that I would strongly advocate. Is if it's not deemed appropriate for it to be put in as an essential, encourage your senior management teams to put it in as a desirable. Kelly has put in, with the review of job descriptions you carry out annually, has this continued to include job descriptions in Wales? Yes, so the survey of job descriptions we're doing for all 4 UK nations. So yes, so that includes Wales. And I think actually, I don't quote me on this, but my sense is that actually Public Health Wales has actually been ahead of employers in England in terms of including registration in job descriptions. So we didn't actually have enough from the devolved nations to do a quantitative analysis comparing Wales and England, but over time we should be able to do that. So Kelly has also asked what next for research in this area. I think that I'd be interested in doing a parallel study with practitioners. So we've talked to employers about how they value it. I've had a number of informal conversations with practitioners, some of whom are really positive about the sense of value that it's given themselves, but a sense that their employers don't value it. So, but it was interesting that several of the line managers I spoke to, who were themselves registered practitioners, had actually felt that it had helped them in their own personal careers. And Joe Marshall has made an interesting comment. How do you manage this with current workforce so as not to undermine people in current roles? Can be difficult to manage. I mean, I think that is a really important point, and I don't have an answer to that. That obviously, as more and more practitioners are registered, we may see a divide between those who aren't and are and aren't. So I think that we need to be mindful of that in terms of equity and team spirit and so on. Julia has said, keen to know where UKPHR is re the advanced practitioner role. This is a key for programs to fill a gap. Yeah, well, I mean, this is something that I'm planning to go back and talk to Martial and the UKPHR board about, because this came out very strongly from this research, and I've had a number of informal conversations with people at that public health principal role. We do need to look at this strategically as a board. See, it's just gone 10:59, so I think we'd probably draw this to a close. Just saying there are a couple of last comments. Great ideas about speaking to practitioners and an agreement. So one thing I would say is anybody interested in this area, I'm very happy to, I want to do further work in this area. So, you know, if you want further discussion with me, please do drop me an email. You can contact me either via UKPHR or I'll make sure that my email is made available. So thank you all very much for participating, and I think I should let you have a short break before the next workshop. But I will make sure if you posted any other comments, I'll make sure that I've read them, and if I can, respond to those outside of this session. So thank you very much, and I'll close it there.